Scene, a slow fade in from black. The sound of a gentle, eerie wind blowing over a barren landscape. A single, deep cello note hums. Narrator: the Moroccan High Atlas Mountains. A land of brutal, jagged peaks, and valleys carved by time itself. It's a place where the sun scorches the earth for years without mercy. And then, the rains come like a flood, reshaping the world overnight. Long pause. For centuries, survival here depended on one thing, and one thing only: water. But sometimes, that water doesn't just come from the sky. Sometimes, it comes from a place much darker. And it comes with a price. Long pause. Deep in this unforgiving landscape, there was a tribe called the Ait Atta. To outsiders, they seemed untouchable. While neighboring tribes choked on dust, and watched their livestock starve during endless droughts, the Ait Atta thrived. Their fields were an impossible canvas of green. Almond trees sagged under the weight of their fruit. Olives dripped like heavy jewels. It was as if they had a private agreement with the heavens. But they didn't. Their secret wasn't a prayer for rain. Their secret was a well. A deep, ancient well, nestled in a hollow dip in the earth. A place they called the Well of Purity. Now, the Ait Atta didn't just know this land. They were fused with it. They lived in houses of stone and clay, isolated, and intensely private. They didn't marry outsiders. They kept their bloodline tight, a closed loop of tradition. Their life was simple, but their prosperity was legendary. And at the center of it all, pulsing like a heart, was this well. The water wasn't just water. It was liquid life. Crystalline, pure, and ice-cold even in the scorching summer. You could look into it, and see your face reflected back, like a perfect mirror. But the Ait Atta knew the secret behind the reflection. They weren't alone in that hollow. Beneath the surface, in the unseen chambers carved by underground springs, lived other residents. A tribe of the Djinn. But these were not the chaotic, whispering demons of the desert. The Ait Atta called them the Muslim Djinn. They were a devout, spiritual people of the unseen world. Their sanctuary was the well's source. In the last third of the night, when darkness was thickest, the villagers could sometimes hear a faint, beautiful hum, rising from the water. The sound of recitation, of worship. It was a perfect, silent agreement. A symbiosis between the seen and the unseen. The women of the Ait Atta, when they went to collect water at dusk, would sprinkle a little musk, or orange blossom water, near the edge. It wasn't fear. It was a greeting. A good evening, to their invisible neighbors. The men, when leading their thirsty donkeys down, would speak the name of God loudly over the water. It was a sign of respect. And in return, the Muslim Djinn wrapped the entire village in an invisible shield. No malevolent spirit, no demon, could cross that barrier. A child could sleep alone under an olive tree, miles from home, and the parents wouldn't worry. They knew their children were guarded by eyes they couldn't see. This was the balance. And for generations, it held. The Ait Atta were living in a paradise on earth, protected by the lords of the well. But that's the thing about paradise. You never realize you're in it until you burn it down yourself. The cello music shifts, becoming slightly discordant. A low, rumbling percussion starts. Seasons cycled. The unbearable drought years finally broke. And when the rain came, it came with a vengeance. Torrential downpours filled the rivers. The valleys flooded. Suddenly, water was everywhere. Water that fell, for free, from the sky. Long pause. Prosperity, over time, does a strange thing to the human heart. It hardens it. It erases memory. The Ait Atta began to forget the dry years of cracked earth and hollow-bellied cattle. They forgot the anxious nights when the only water in the world was at the bottom of that deep, stone pit. They looked at the muddy river, surging past the hillside, and then they looked at the steep, treacherous path, down to the well of purity. And they made a choice. Born of laziness and arrogance. Why break our backs climbing down to the well, they thought, when the river is right here. The daily rituals of respect evaporated. The women stopped sprinkling musk. The men stopped saying God's name over the water. They started letting their animals wade into the murky river, and the pure, spring-fed canal from the well was left to stagnate. But neglect is one thing. Desecration, long pause, is another. A new generation of young men had grown up in this time of excess. They were the sons of the good years. Spoiled, arrogant, and blind to the old ways. The hollow of the well, once a place of peace, became their hideaway. They would gather there to brew illegal alcohol, stumbling around drunk in a place that had once echoed only with prayer. It was rebellion. It was filth. And in the subterranean depths, the Muslim Djinn watched. They saw their sanctuary, the place where they purified themselves for prayer, become a dump for clay jars of booze. The beautiful scent of musk was replaced by the reek of vomit and stale liquor. The treaty of mutual respect was being obliterated, one day at a time. But still, the Djinn waited. They were patient. Then, long pause. The final straw broke. A man from the village was coming home from the market. His mule was sickly, its eyes rolling back, its steps stumbling. Just as he reached the entrance to the hollow, the animal collapsed with a heavy thud, and died, right there on the spot. Now, a decent man would have dragged the carcass away, dug a deep grave, and buried his beast of burden. But this man, looking at the steep slope, and smelling the rotting flesh, saw a shortcut. He saw the well. That deep, dark, abandoned hole in the ground. A perfect, ready-made grave. He called his sons. Without a second thought, they hoisted the rotting carcass of the dead mule, and sent it tumbling down into the darkness of the well of purity. There was a splash. Then, silence. Long pause. The final desecration was complete. They had taken a creature of filth and death, and thrown it into the source of their life, into the holy sanctuary of the unseen. The line between gratitude and arrogance had been crossed permanently. And the Muslim Djinn, the ones who had protected their children for centuries, now saw the rotting corpse of a donkey, decomposing in their prayer hall. The reply was swift. And it was terrifying. Justice doesn't always come from a court. Sometimes, it comes from the ground beneath your feet. The music stops abruptly. A single, low-frequency drone fades in. It started with the man who threw the donkey. The very next day, his prize bull, a magnificent animal he was fattening up to sell for a fortune, dropped dead. No sickness. No warning. Just a massive beast, worth a year's wages, stone dead in the field. When the herder brought him the news, the man didn't repent. He didn't drop to his knees and ask for forgiveness. He tore his clothes. He screamed at the sky. He blamed God. Why me? What did I do to deserve this? That was the first sign. Then, the children. The young men, who had been drinking by the well. They woke up one morning, with a strange rash. It wasn't measles. It wasn't smallpox. It was something else entirely. Huge, angry welts, that burrowed into the skin, itching with a fire that wouldn't stop. They scratched, until they bled. They mixed sulfur with oil, crushed herbs, everything they knew. Nothing worked. The rash spread like leprosy, and soon, anyone who even touched them, became infected. They had to isolate the young men, in a hut on the edge of the village, screaming in agony, their skin crawling, with an invisible torment. Long pause. And then, the storehouses. The underground granaries, they had filled to bursting, with the surplus harvest. When they opened them, a black cloud of weevils and locusts poured out. The grain wasn't just infested. It wasn't there anymore. It was dust. Black, rotten dust. Panic set in. Plague, starvation, financial ruin. It had all happened, in the space of a single week. Long pause. Finally, an old man, one of the last keepers of the ancient memories, stood up in the village square. He confronted the chief. His voice trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of the terrible truth. "This is not bad luck," the old man said, his eyes sweeping over the terrified crowd. "This is not an evil eye, from a jealous neighbor. We have angered the neighbors we cannot see. We filled the house of God with a corpse. Our children drink poison in their den. We have broken the covenant that our grandfathers swore to the Muslim Djinn." Long pause. It was a wake-up call, uttered in the language of doom. The tribe was on the brink of extinction. They had a powerful enemy they couldn't see, couldn't fight, and couldn't flee from. There was only one possible solution. They needed someone who could walk between the two worlds. Someone who held authority over the seen and the unseen. They needed the fakir. Sound of a soft, spiritual chant. Footsteps on gravel. A day's journey away, living in a secluded san.